Okay, I will go ahead and get started. This is Dan Kohn, the Executive Director of CNCF. I'd like to welcome everyone to our monthly Asia-friendly time Telecom user group meeting. People are pasting in their info into the Google Doc that I just pasted in the URL for. The main updates I'd like to chat about are the progress with the CNF conformance test suite that the Volk team is working away on. I am pasting in a slide deck that gives some information about this test suite, and the early material is now open source, so you can actually get to it at this URL. But I think, as with many folks on the call, our in-person meetings are kind of out of not going to happen for the foreseeable future right now. I'm in New York City, and we just had it announced that the schools are closing, as well as all restaurants. And so I think we are looking at making virtual progress on this going forward. But I'm very happy to chat for a little while about the CNF conformance, and then just talk as well about the relationship with the work from RI2 and RA2. So I guess I would ask, before we go ahead, are there any other agenda items that folks would like to talk about? I am happy to say that we're going to do an update this week with the details of KubeCon Amsterdam is going to be pushed back to August, and we're going to have the exact dates this week. But also, is anyone on the call joining for the first time that perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself? It's *6 to unmute.
Hey, Ryan, this is Panek. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
thank you.
Hey, hi, folks. So this is Pranay. I'm part of a startup called Signos. We are into performance monitoring, application monitoring. Joining this call for the first time, we are in Bangalore, India, and like most of you guys, I think we are working from home. So that's about me. Just want to join this call to understand, like, how does the Telecom user group works, and like what do you guys discuss here? So just here to listen.
Great, we're happy to have you.
Thank you.
Maybe
anyone
I
else
would.
need the first?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Dan, sorry, Dan. Maybe I would introduce myself, because last time we didn't have a chance. My name is Grzegorz. I am from OVO. It's a Polish company. We are focused on telco market and working with our customers here in Middle East. And our main focus and interest here is to merging or allowing migration from legacy network functions towards 5G cloud native functions, and how legacy protocols can work in cloud native functions. And this is more or less our story. Thanks.
Great, welcome.
Yes, and it's also Anders Fagerlind from Ericsson, also joining for the second time. I didn't introduce myself last meeting, so I plan to join the Telco user group here from now on and onwards.
Sorry, where did you say you were from, Anders?
Ericsson, so I'm working out of Sweden.
Yes.
Hi, it's Dominik Skowacz. I'm from OVO.
Welcome, Dominic.
Hello,
Folks, this is... Sorry, go on.
Okay, so hello, here's Grzegorz Panek. I'm from Orange Labs Poland. I'm working mostly on the orchestration part of the VNFs. As we know, all the world go to the side of the CNFs. So we are migrating from our perspective of the orchestration to the CNFs. Thanks.
Hey folks, this is Gaurav from InfraCloud Technologies. We are a startup operating in the cloud native space, joining out of interest. So far in the listening mode.
Great.
Hi Dan, this is Atul from Rakuten. This is my second call. I met you, if you remember, shortly on the Bangalore forum, Kubernetes forum actually. Till now I've been listening and editing few of the reference architecture issues up. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, welcome.
Hello. Yeah, hello. This is Amr Mukhtar. So I'm with Intel. This is my first time to join actually the group. We work on the domain of the as well accelerating the network functions and the orchestration as well of the CNFs on the particularly on the network edge and the with the radio access network. And this is in the domain of the telecom and the on-premises deployments. So it's interesting, like for me as well to join the team and like to get in touch with you and as well like hopefully maybe to contribute to the group. Thanks. That's me.
Great. Okay, I think there's enough new folks here that it might make sense for me to hand it off to Denver for a few minutes to chat about the progress on the CNF conformance test suite and how you're going about that. Denver, I'm not sure if you might want to show some of the, or refer to some of the slides that I pasted in, or just talk about it. But Taylor is on vacation this week, so not available. But it would be great if you wouldn't mind chatting for a few minutes about what you guys are building.
Thanks. Yeah, I can go off without the slides. So yeah, for those of you that don't know, the CNF conformance suite is basically trying to verify, is a CNF cloud native? Is it conforming to the methodologies or that we want to implement in cloud native? So some of you are probably familiar with the white paper that's been in progress in the TUG, and that sort of starts outlining what those principles are. It should scale, it should be redundant, and it should scale horizontally. So where the test suite is right now is we've started implementing these proof of concept tests that try to verify that. So I guess in a sense, transcribing the white paper to actual codified tests. So we're doing things like, okay, can we send data through the CNF, and does it scale up and does it scale down, and does it continue to send traffic whilst we do that? Or horizontal scaling, can we have 6 instances and the traffic is still able to be sent through the application?
Sorry, can I have a question here?
Yeah, sure.
Do you use some kind of a uniform language to formulate these test cases, or how is it described during the tests?
So we're kind of thinking we might, well, we're still investigating, but we're going to try create some form of standard interface to be like, well, in Kubernetes, you have a thing called an entry point, right, that verifies the pods up. So we have access to that. So as a minimum viable solution, we can take that and go, okay, we can reuse that and verify that the application's up. And then for more complex situations, we're going to have some way of, I guess, having the person that's saying, I want you to test my CNF, saying, this is how the data should, or here's the data flow, and defining some way to send data. And then we'll be able to take that and go, okay, now we know how to interact with the application at some minimum base level. And then I guess the rest of the testing on the side of that is going to be standardized through Kubernetes APIs or things that we expect to always work. Like Kubernetes has inbuilt functions for scaling horizontally. So Kubernetes can use scale this horizontally and expect a binary status and response.
But you are not planning to use any like test framework like Robot or something, but everything is written in like raw code of, I don't know, whatever, Python or Go or.
Right now we're writing it in Crystal, so we're not using I guess a specific test framework yet, but we're trying to, I guess, write something that's framework-like, so it'll be easy for people to add tests later on, and hence why we kind of chose Crystal, because it's a lot like Ruby, and so for people that are in the DevOps space, they're quite often familiar with those DSLs. And
okay.
I guess
So
building on
that
that
was basically the root of my question, like how difficult will it be to add new test cases and or review?
should be really easy, and if it's not, we're aiming to get feedback from people on how to make it easy, because we want to make it a framework so that it's as easy as possible to add new tests and it's all pluggable.
Okay, thank you.
Denver, could you maybe find one test from the repo that's relatively simple and paste it in here?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. I'll do that after, or I'll do that in like 5 minutes, actually. It'll take me a wee while to find a good one. Anyway, so the goal, I guess, is with these tests is to then have like a collection of, or weight the tests. Some may have a high weight, like if it can't horizontally scale, that's really bad. But if maybe it's a little more monolithic or something, that's less bad. And then weight them up and then run all these tests. And at the end of when the test suite's done, it can come back and say, oh, you failed these, but passed all of these, you're silver. And then, oh, you passed all of these, but failed this one, but it's really bad, so not so great. So I guess that kind of covers what the test suite is aiming to do. And Dan, if you have anything to add onto that.
I guess I'd say that all of the tests today have been focused on the CNF artifacts. So, and I will emphasize everything we're doing is open source and meant to be publicly available, so that people can be building this test suite into their internal CI/CD systems and confirming that they're following best practices as they go along. We're also going to be adding a series of tests looking at the platform side to ensure that essentially the certified Kubernetes platform is offering the necessary services to run CNFs. But that work is just beginning. So I wonder if I could answer, or Denver could, any more questions about the test suite or the process we're going through, or how why we're doing it. And if not, and maybe it's somewhat related, it would be worthwhile, I think, for Gergely to give an update on the RA2 and RI2 work, if you don't mind, Gergely. And then also, now that the KubeCon Amsterdam's been postponed and the Open Networking and Edge Summit postponed, and the CNTT meeting after that, if you could talk about the schedule that you're meeting at and how that's going to make progress going forward.
Okay, maybe I will need the help of Rabi to discuss the scheduling parts and RA2. But in RA2, we are focusing mostly on ironing out issues in chapter 2, 3, and 4, where chapter 2 is the, let's say, the incoming requirements to the reference architecture. Chapter 3 are the main concepts, let's say, and chapter 4 are the component level selections. And there are lots of discussions around if, for example, lifecycle management of the Kubernetes cluster is part of the reference architecture or not. And so far we decided that that it is not part of the reference architecture. We expect that it's given, and also we expect that the underlying cloud infrastructure and or bare metal infrastructure is there, and we don't discuss the management of those. Also, we had lots of discussions around what is part of RA2 and what is part of RI2 in CNTT, and the overall assumption is that everything what is visible for the VNFs is an RA2 decision. So we have to define everything what is visible for the VNFs in RA2, while what is not visible for the VNFs can be decided in the reference implementation too. And this means that we need to decide even about components of the infrastructure, because, for example, the CNI plugins are visible for the VNFs, or if we use, I know, network service mesh or CNI, that is visible for it's also visible for the VNF. Like, how do we provide CPU isolation and this kind of things? So that means that in reference architecture 2, we will need to define all of these components in the infrastructure which are visible. And we had lots of discussions around this, but I think it's now clear for everybody that we should go into this direction. And on the releases, so we still keep the release cadence what we planned, besides the fact that we needed to cancel the face-to-face meeting what was planned after the ONS, but I don't know by heart the exact release date, and I hope that Rabi can help me with that.
Yes, thanks, Gergely. So in terms of releases, we kept the Baldy release, which was targeting the 10th of April as is. And from the reference implementation perspective, RI2, it will focus, as Gergely mentioned, into the requirement that we expect to see from the installer that will install the platform. And this is kind of where the focus initially at RI will be around those requirements. And once the requirements are set, the expectation and the hope is to work very closely with the TUG group then in order to determine what would be the open source projects that will allow us to have the implementation realized in a proper lab that we can start experimenting with and bringing the reference implementation from open source components. Now, I just want to add one little detail about what Gergely mentioned around what's different between RA2 and RI2. As Gergely mentioned, anything that is exposed to the CNFs or the workload is certainly in the scope of RA2. Now, I just want to highlight not just the things that is exposed to the CNF directly, but also the things that will impact the behavior of the CNF is considered a scope of RA2, because at the end of the day, we would like to give not just standard interfaces and APIs to the workload, but we also need to give deterministic behavior and functionality. So anything that the CNF is reliant on to deliver a functionality or a performance will be specified in RA2. Now, as Gergely mentioned, when it comes to lifecycle management of the cluster itself, it is considered out of scope of RA2. But when we come to the reference implementation, we would like to have a solution that will allow us to have the reference implementation. So expectation is to, I don't want to say specify, the expectation is to select one solution or another in the reference implementation to make sure we start with it, and more implementation can from vendors can also be still conformant to the RA2, but the intention really is for the RI2 to select something that will be conformant to the RA2 and use that as the base for any conformance testing we need to perform for either the infrastructure level or the workload level.
Thanks for helping out. And of course, there is lots of overlap between RI2 and the CNF conformance test. Because, for example, the descriptors are describing also infrastructure pieces, what we plan to check in RI2.
So I don't know, Gergely, if it's worth also mentioning to them around our plan for the RC2, which is really the conformance.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Do you want to speak about it, or would you like me to do that?
It's better if you do that.
Robbie, that's that's quite helpful. And I to be honest, I still get them a little confused between RA2 and RI2. Could you maybe just say one more time at a high level? So it's reference architecture, reference implementation. The two refers to the cloud native as opposed to VNFs. But can you just say again the role of each one? And I'll try and get it this time.
Yeah, I can try to do that. So the reference architecture 2 is basically a description, a specification of how do you build your Kubernetes cluster, while RI2 is an implementation. So it's an actual Kubernetes cluster installed with a specific installer and configured in a way that it's compliant with RA2.
So in other words, Dan, if I go to my CNF vendor and I tell him I would like you to build me a network function based on container workload, what do I need to give him from the infrastructure point of view or from the specification of the cluster point of view to assist him to build the workload and network function based on containers? This is kind of building the relationship between us and the workload, but as well assisting our cloud platform providers of what are the functionalities we expect to see in the cloud platform, and also what would be the level of conformance expected and what kind of elements we need to see in there. The reference implementation is actually selecting an open source projects and tools that will allow us to have an instantiation of the cloud platform or the cluster into a proper lab. And that will allow CNF vendors to, instead of having to know in details what would be the platform for Vodafone or what would be the platform for AT&T or Orange and so on, they just need to understand what the functionalities they expect to see from the cloud platform. But also they could use the reference implementation to try out and deploy the CNF on top of. So the reference implementation is just creating and the realization of the reference architecture and having a real instance of it using open source components and open source tooling and open source labs as well, community labs.
Great, I appreciate that.
And if I add one extra step to that, so the reference conformance, which would be what would be the CNTT requirement for the testing needed to happen on both the infrastructure level and the workload level. When I say infrastructure, I mean the cloud platform. When I say workload, I mean the CNFs. So although we know CNF testbed is the CNF performance test project within CNCF is having all those great tools and a framework that allow us to create those test cases, those requirements into what do we need to test and what metrics and what the bars are and what the verdict would be in each case will come. The expectation is from CNTT, and as those requirements coming from the RC2, that will have very clear requirement into the any CNF conformance program to assist them to take these requirements, convert them into actual test scripts, and implement them into the framework of choice. So the RC also will have a section called cookbook, and this is what we did in the VNF world. We do the same in the CNF world. And the cookbook will give everybody who reads that document what the tools that need to be used to run those tests and what projects and what test cases in details need to be run. And that means if I have a cloud platform that I would like to certify, I just read the cookbook within RC2, and that will assist me exactly of what are the tools that I need to run, what are the tests I need to run, and what would be the passing criteria for me. That's kind of the plan for RC2 as well.
Okay. I appreciate you clarifying that. So, Denver, you were gonna, oh yeah, Denver pasted in a specific task written in this crystal language, which is similar to Ruby, that is looking for privileged containers, where we're suggesting that containers, CNFs by default should not run privileged. And so it's an example of what it checks for. And that's specifically line 22 that does a kubectl command that it's based around. And so we are interested in having additional participants get involved in the conformance work, the test suite work, to both defining what what we should be looking for, and then actually writing the code to do it. The other area that I didn't mention before, but should have, is that we do have a white paper that is pretty much done, and I'm pasting in that link here, that I would encourage folks to take a look at, where we're looking to publish the first version of this soon. We may iterate it over time, and are just under discussions with a number of telcos on who actually can, we're going to list as the co-author of it, where our goal is to have operators be a number of the co-authors, which is somewhat standard in this space. And so in particular, if you do work for an operator and would like to volunteer for that, we'd be very interested to have you as a co-author, and you can reach out to me. And then for most of you, you have a process in your company on how to support, how to get approval for that. Could I open it up for questions or comments from other folks on the call?
Maybe a question from my side, Gergely speaking. Denver, please can you share, if possible, more details about this reference architecture, reference implementation? I know that they were somewhere, but honestly, it's too many links, and if you could share them, it would be great.
You are asking for the reference architecture of CNTT or the CNF conformance?
CNTT, because CNF conformance is here. I see that, but you mentioned about architecture implementation.
Yes.
And
I will post them to the chat. Give me a sec.
Okay, thanks. Regarding conformance, I found one of the link where is the information about usage. And please let me understand that because some of the test cases are in POC and some of them are marked with green checkbox. The other are to do. So does it mean that this is the status of how advanced the specific test case is?
Yeah, correct. So proof of concept, I guess it's just a foundation. If it's done, then that means we're happy with it, how it's currently implemented. And if it's to do, it means it's under active development for it.
Okay, thanks.
I posted the array2 and array2 links to the chat, and I also added them to the minutes.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Sorry, Dan, one question about the white papers. So you mentioned that you're looking for co-authors, but like the plan for the release date is still around the formal date of KubeCon. Okay, it looks like I have audio problems.
I can hear you, Gergely. I'm fine. I can hear you.
Oh, but it looks like
Yeah, we lost Dan.
Yes, Gergely, I think we lost you.
Hi, I'm sorry. I just unmuted myself there. I was saying that, yes, I think it's going to be either the end of the month or maybe the week after that. We're used to having events to announce things around, but unfortunately, with the coronavirus, events seem off the table for a good while.
Yeah, we have to have new practices. Cool, thanks for the answer.
Absolutely. I guess I'll ask the question, is everybody on the call working from home, or are there some folks in Europe or Asia who are still connected, who are still going to the office?
No, we are working from home.
Yeah, from home is the best practice.
I have office very close, so I came to office.
Well, I appreciate folks' time today. That hopefully that gives you some useful background to get up to speed. We would love to get folks involved in this conformance test suite, and then I know that Rabi and Gergely are very happy to have additional participation on the CNTT work that they're leading. Can I ask again if there's any other questions or feedback? I guess another area that we're going to be looking at are some additional topics for white papers. One of them in particular is going to be on this CNF conformance test suite and explaining some of the context for it. But first, we've got to get this first prologue chapter published before we move to anything else.
So one more thing, Dan, if that's okay. It would be good if we maybe next meeting, hopefully, we try together agree on some kind of diagrams that will clarify to everybody really the scope of CNTT, the scope of CNF conformance test, the scope of LFN OVP phase 2, and how they all fit nicely together, so everybody knows what those are and how they fit together. Would that be something you're interested to kind of trying to work out together?
Yeah, I would love to do that, Rabi. I agree that would be useful.
Okay.
We've been a little sort of in two separate paths right now, but I think it does make sense to converge those.
Awesome.
I'll just mention that Taylor, who's leading the work on the conformance test suite, is off this week, but I would be very happy to meet next week to chat about it.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, would anyone else like to speak up on this? I do appreciate folks' time today. We'll have another call in 2 weeks on the, no, it's actually in 3 weeks at a more US and European friendly time, 8 a.m. California time on Monday the 6th. And hopefully we'll have some additional progress to show by then, including the published white paper. So thanks everyone for your time today, and speak to you on the mailing list and then on this call in 3 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.